If the 18th century was a period of rapid change, the 19th century was even more so. On the back of the agrarian revolution came the industrial revolution, and also the consolidation of the British Empire. The population of Britain doubled in the first half of the 19th century and then doubled again before 1900. As a result of all this, there was considerable social change. And anyone who has read Dickens will recognise the social problems that emerged from rapid urban growth and an ever-increasing gap between the rich and the poor. And during that century, Methodism changed considerably. John Wesley died in 1791, still believing that his Methodist movement could remain a part of the Church of England. But in the early part of the 19th century, Methodism began to be clearly a church, or rather, churches, because the early part of the century saw a series of splits within the Methodist movement. You can see the vestiges of those separations today when you notice in a Methodist chapel that there'll be a dedication to it as a primitive, a Wesleyan, or a new connection building. Most of those new denominations came into existence in the early part of the 19th century and came back together in the early part of the 20th. But there were some movements, the Independent Methodists, the Wesleyan Reformed Union and the Salvation Army, which to this day continue their existence as independent ecclesial bodies. The Methodist Church was part of, and to a large extent the catalyst for, rapid growth of what we now call the free churches. The older dissenting movements, the Baptists, the Independents, the Presbyterians, had also been reinvigorated by the 18th century evangelical revival. And as a result of that, there was in the 19th century a huge amount of chapel building. And the free churches together contributed greatly to the shaping of society in the 19th century. The rapid growth in all the Protestant nonconformist denominations meant that Protestant nonconformity was a recognised part of the social makeup of society. By 1900, Protestant nonconformists were the largest Christian voice in Britain. At the beginning of the 19th century, there had been considerable social and political disadvantage to being a nonconformist. In the course of the century, all those legal restrictions were removed. The numerical growth in relation to population was considerable in the first half of the century, but gradually it slowed. And after about 1870, the nonconformist churches continued to grow, but to grow less rapidly than the population as a whole. During the course of the 19th century, and largely as a result of Britain's imperial expansion overseas, there was considerable missionary endeavour. The Methodist Church established a presence in many parts of the world, and all Methodists regarded themselves as being part of the Methodist missionary work. Mission overseas became hugely significant. But strangely, as Methodism became a global church, it also established itself very much as a local church. We see in the 19th century the emergence of what we call chapel culture, that around their building, the members of the Methodist Society would seem to live the whole of their social lives. They would not only attend the services on Sunday, sometimes 3 of them. There would also be meetings for them throughout the week, and often members of the Methodist societies would marry each other. The social and political impact of this tremendous growth of the nonconformist churches was noticeable. And Methodism became associated particularly with liberal politics in the latter part of the 19th century. It was also involved in the early trade unions movement and in the foundations of the Labour Party. Methodists were prominent in their campaigns on social issues, From the late 19th century onwards, that included the campaign against the evils of alcohol, which has left Methodism with a reputation for teetotalism to this day. Methodists, particularly in the cities, engaged with the issues around deprivation. Leading Methodists were prominent in establishing practical solutions to some of the problems of the cities. Hugh Price Hughes, who established the West London Mission just around the corner from Methodist Church House, was prominent as a voice for the nonconformists in political circles. It was he more than anybody else who established the notion of the nonconformist conscience. And Thomas Bowman Stevenson established the National Children's Home, dealing with some of those who were left as orphan children on the streets of the cities. He was also key in establishing what was to become the Wesley Deaconess movement. As the 19th century turned into the 20th century, Methodism conceived its mission to those inner cities with the establishment of mission halls or central halls, like the great Westminster Central Hall.